And our 11:30 item, 6.8, review and consideration of travel and reimbursement policy from our admin office.
Good morning again, Board. Stephen Carter, Assistant County Administrative Officer. The bulk of the presentation will be done by Christine Hutt, our admin analyst. But this is the first time we've brought any significant adjustment to the travel policy since 2011. There was a 2018 adjustment which increased the maximum limit if it's at a conference from 125 to 175 with approval. So this was basically a full rewrite with keeping as many of the old elements as possible, but following any updates to the code. And so that I don't steal any thunder, I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
Christine Hutt, Administrative Analyst. It is my pleasure to be here today. And before you is, for your consideration, is the new travel and reimbursement policy. The current policy was first adopted in 2001, and the current policy is outdated, and it does present some fiscal problems for both the Auditor Controller's Office and the Administrative Office. As Mr. Carter said, that the policy retains the intent of the current policy, especially of the intent of exercising responsible stewardship of public funds. The attached policy is a full rewrite. It encompasses eligibility, pre-authorization, transportation, lodging, meals, mileage, and claiming reimbursement. The lodging and meals expenses adopt the acceptable rates as published by the General Services Administration, the GSA, and the mileage reimbursement rate is tied to the rate published by the State of California Controller's website. The policy also serves as a qualifying written accountable plan by meeting the other criteria as defined by the Internal Revenue Service. So the notable highlights of this are what I just mentioned as far as the rates of reimbursement for mileage and lodging and meals. So the State of California Controller's Office publishes a mileage reimbursement rate for the state employees, and we are going to follow that. This policy suggests that we follow that, and that current rate is higher than we currently have in our policy for reimbursement rates. And the State of California follows the IRS adjustment, and so I think it lags about 6 months, but this is looked at the IRS, at the federal level annually. So they're trying to keep it in keeping with what is reasonable to reimburse. Lodging and meals expenses, we found that most of the counties that we surveyed in the state of California do follow the GSA per diem rates, which are set up to be geographically unique. For example, a per diem rate for lodging and meals in Washington, D.C. is going to be different from what you will see in the Sacramento area. So the country's been mapped out, and then for each area, when you are looking for where you're going to be traveling, you will have different lodging maximum rates and meal rates. Pre-authorization form being submitted with the reimbursement claims is something new. The current policy does require that there be a written pre-authorization at the department level before travel expenses are incurred. The change here is that we're requesting that this policy requests that the pre-authorization be submitted also to the Auditor Controller's Office. And hopefully this will bring a little more awareness to the actual costs that are being incurred in travel and prevent overdrafts of accounts that reimburse those fees or those claims. Also, the policy follows the rules of an accountable plan as determined by the Internal Revenue Service. This is important because certain items of reimbursement may be considered taxable events to an employee. And by having an accountable plan, this helps us comply with those IRS regulations so that we can we will not be, or I would say we do not want to, we would like to minimize any taxable events. But this is, but then, since we're talking about taxable events, this is something that is a big change. And that is that according to the IRS rules for accountable plans, same-day meals reimbursement without an overnight stay is considered a taxable event. The IRS determines that business travel requires being away from your tax base, your home, for a period over a working day and requires a rest period of an overnight stay. Otherwise, that meal is considered a taxable event if there's no overnight stay. And those are the main changes within this new policy.
So, I did speak with at least one other department head, and I understand that, and I think we've got some great improvements here. Things, tying it to the GSA, so we're not locked in to amounts that become irrelevant in the short future is great. And I think we have a department head meeting coming up later this month. I think it would be a great opportunity for the department heads to take some time and weigh in on these changes and see how this could affect different departments which may or may not travel more, and just get some really important feedback. So that's what I would like to request today, but I see we have a couple of pens up. Supervisor Spatier?
Yeah, I just to add to what Ms. Hutt said is before we had, I think you had to submit it within 30 days, and if it wasn't submitted within 30 days, maybe it was 60 days, then you can go to the Board of Supervisors. That seems to be eliminated entirely, and I love that because I hate the kind of in-between situation. And sometimes we're looking at $20 or something really small, and it's like it's taking up some time. So I think that this puts a barrier in front and saying, meet the guidelines or else it's going to be a taxable thing. There's no choice. So I like that. I do have a bit of an issue, and I guess it's personal, and you won't be seeing anything coming from me, but it seems like we're adding or providing greater detail for the Board of Supervisors, where I thought it was going to be for out of county. I'm going up to the first page where it speaks. Now it just says mileage and travel expenses incurred. But then it talks about all of the committees and appointments and all that travel time, and
They're outside of the county committee appointments?
No. It says travel to meetings of appointed organization, and then it says out of county. And I feel like that should be smushed together, that if it's out of county travel to meetings of appointed organizations, that makes sense to me. But the rest, yes, we do accumulate mileage, but I'm uncomfortable in asking for more than what we already receive. And so I would like to see that just be for out of county. And then obviously and not by motion of Board of Supervisors, if you are on a committee like CSAC or RCRC or things like that, you're expected to go to those things. If you're asking for something outside of the appointment, then going to a motion of the Board of Supervisors, just as was just done recently for the resilience group for Chair Paiska and for our resiliency officer. I'm okay with that going to the Board of Supervisors, but just traveling within the county, I think that's adding more.
I brought that up with Mr. Carter yesterday too. And one of the things that we kind of all decided on when we talked about the salary increases is that it's now a full-time job, and this is part of the work inside the county. So I agree with that. And if we have to tweak some wordings for that part of it and make it extra clear, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it would only pertain to long travel or anything like that. I think we've taken out of the budget every year that we had talked about, or at least brought it way down, which.
Or just don't use it.
Yeah, or just don't use it. So I completely agree with that conversation. more taking care of all of our employees and everybody that needs to travel, every department head, every employee that needs to go somewhere. We want to make sure that they get the right rate for their mileage. They make sure that they get the food that they need when they're there because they're doing the pertinent work for our people. So I completely agree on, we don't need to revamp ours. We should take it away, but that's my thoughts on it.
Supervisor Green.
Yeah, these are more questions and comments, and I don't need an answer today. I do think this needs to go to the department heads for feedback. Some of the questions I had on the draft document, page 4 of 18 of that draft document, reimbursement for gratuities. So on the one hand, B subdivision I says you don't get reimbursed for tips, but then there's the next sentence right after that appears to provide an exemption that if you get a tip as part of a bill, you can get it. So it's unclear. It appears to prohibit tips, then it allows you tips, but it's unclear the mechanism. The other thing on that same page, claims must be digitally completed. I know there's a lot of Adobe signed documents flying around this county, and that's great, except when those same documents have to come back to the board, and sometimes those digitally signed documents don't play nice with Granicus and stuff like that. So if we're going to be all Adobe sign all the time, let's figure it out so we can access those documents properly in all applications, including when we're taking a look at them. On page 14 of that same document, at the bottom of the page, 6.2, tax consequences of travel reimbursement. It says it may or may not have income tax consequences. If I am getting an expense check, my personal expectation is I'm getting reimbursed for money I already put out. That's my taxable money that I already put out. And so I can't answer whatever the IRS is thinking on that, but may or may not does not provide me a lot of clarity. So I am going to assume right now that a reimbursement check is going to be taxable under this new policy. But if there's an allotment where a reimbursement check is not, that would be more attractive and probably more in keeping with my thoughts of what a reimbursement plan should be. But those are questions. Again, not looking for answers today. Thank you.
Would you like me to address the reimbursement of the meals? A little clarifying. Our understanding from reading through the IRS policy is that they're looking at whether or not this is a fringe benefit that should be taxed or something reasonable and necessary during the course of travel, of business travel, legitimate business travel. And within that context of legitimate business travel, any expense that you spend for the lodging, your meals, your mileage, that you would be putting out of pocket. Typically not lodging, right? Because mostly we'll take care of that internally by doing that for you on a Cal card so that you're not out of pocket. The only time that there's really an issue that we had to think about this one when reading the IRS policy or their rules, was it the same day travel in which there was no overnight stay, and that becomes a taxable event. So unless we're looking at a same day travel, that's the only area that would not be reimbursed. Meals.
Correct.
Your mileage.
Okay, but the question is, when the reimbursement happens, does the county tax that amount?
No.
Only in those specific scenarios which would run through payroll, which is why it becomes taxable. It's very few. If it stays within our 60-day plan, which is what the IRS requires, it's not taxable. The single day, if the department decides to pay it, which is outside of the plan, that's when it becomes taxable and goes on to your payroll. If it stays within that box, your travel per diem, no, that's not taxable.
Okay.
There was one thing that the auditor's office wanted me to bring up, sorry. So related to the tipping, it's only when it's not optional that it's allowed, where it's auto put on. If it's optional in any way, it's not allowed.
That's the way that I read it.
If it's included.
That doesn't happen very often, but if like you're in a group of 6,
I can't find it.
it's auto put on. And there's some places that have it auto put on. That's the only time it's allowable as an expense from the county.
I believe the IRS accepts that as well, because they said if the tip amount is included in the bill, but if the gratuity is part of it, then that is not a taxable event to the employee.
Yeah, because if it's a choice and you feel like giving $20 when it's a $3 meal, that doesn't mean you get reimbursed the $20. That would be awkward.
Well, it's also awkward for a restaurant. So if you're a restaurant owner, guess what? If you have government employees taking lunch there, make sure you stick them with a mandatory tip. That's the only way you're going to get it.
Okay, we have a couple department heads here. Did you have some? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to highlight, I'm not sure if CSAC does it, but I know RCRC reimburses any travel or any hotels or anything of the like. And so I know that there's a document they always give, and that's why, I just wanted to highlight that for some of these. And I'm not sure if CSAC does that too. Yeah.
I should look into it. I just never asked to get a reimbursement for it. But I know RCRC, the first time I went to a meeting, they do offer that very vocally, but I haven't seen that from CSAC.
If you use the county car or whatever the case may be, they reimburse the county rather than having the county pay for us to go there, so, yeah.
Supervisor Spatier.
Yeah, I do want to add one thing is, so I'm glad that there's the digital idea. I think that we're going to get a comment that some people don't have the time frame to submit it in time, and so the digital, just like accessing your emails, makes it a lot easier to be able to submit those things. But I do see a couple of times that I get the checks and balances. I think in the long run, ensuring that our auditor controller looks at the policy, looks at the reimbursement request, and makes sure that it falls in line is fine. But I also don't know that our CAO should be looking at these and making, it just seems like, how many would you receive? How long is that going to take? I would prefer you focus on the bigger picture stuff than is your travel reimbursement appropriate versus our auditor controller, which is our elected official to ensure that things follow the regulations and policies. So I'm a little uncomfortable in certain places as to who is the oversight and who does the determination. The way that our structure of our county is, while our CAO is definitely has a broader reach, our CAO is still a department head of administration, and I feel like the department heads should be working with our auditor controller, not through our CAO, where they can make decisions for other departments. I'd love to see our CAO focus on much more important things than just ensuring that the reimbursements are appropriate.
Okay, department heads.
Good morning. Rob Howley, County Sheriff. First off, I'd like to thank admin. They put a lot of work into this, obviously, and there's some really good parts to it. It's a benefit, some increases. I'd simply like to echo Chair Pyska's suggestion that this could possibly go to the department heads for some discussion. I do think there are significant changes that will affect some workload. There's some additional reporting processes, approval processes, particularly for department heads. For a department like mine, excuse me, we travel a lot. This is going to matter. It is going to change some things, particularly the overnight stay issue. We use that frequently, and our people are used to being compensated or at least receiving per diem for those. So just that, in short, there are enough changes. I think it'd be a good benefit for the department heads to get a chance to roundtable this and give suggestions back prior to the board approving it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Well, I think it's afternoon.
Almost.
Almost, okay. Good morning then. Well, this is Doug Gerhardt. I'm the Air Pollution Control Officer with the Lake County Air Quality Management District. Nice short name again. And I had a whole write-up, and then they covered most everything I was going to write, to say to you. But in summary, overall, I really like the policy update. The information, the additional bringing pay and everything up to the modern par with what other districts pay, what other counties pay. We do lose people over funding and these issues all the time, so someone else pays double what we do. So it's an issue that we definitely appreciate that it's coming forward and being brought up. Now, there's a couple issues I'm bringing forward just because as an air district, we are not County of Lake, we are a separate legal entity, so there's some oddities with the policies, and you actually just covered that, which is one of the authority issues. Health and safety code, authorities can't be delegated to a non-air district agency, so that ability to have the approvals and things is a little challenging for us. So, you know, we've had a good discussion with Mr. Carter and come up with a solution, and I think we're on the same page, and going forward, we'll work with them, but there may be some deviations from the policy, however it ends up finalized, because of the legal health and safety code issues that kind of prevents some of that sharing information, you know, that crossing over of authority and other things. So same-day travel, of course, that's an issue. You know, it's a concern. We do a lot of one-day travel events, trainings and things, and not being able to reimburse is, you know, it's a challenge. Staff definitely doesn't appreciate that, but, you know, it is what it is. There may be some other things in the future, but we'll cross those bridges as we come to them. So with that, I'll leave it at that and say I definitely appreciate working with admin to get some of these things clarified before we got here today, so.
Great, thank you.
Can I clarify something?
Sure.
Same-day travel, you could still get reimbursed your mileage, it's just the meals that don't get reimbursed, correct?
It's taxable.
Gotcha.
The meals are taxable.
Yeah.
Okay, now open it up for public comment. I don't see anybody in the Zoom room, and no one's coming up in the chambers, so we'll bring it back to the board. And it was my suggestion, if we have consensus, to give this back to the department heads at their meeting later this month to have a discussion and bring it back with some more revisions, possibly.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, consensus on that. Yes.
Yes, Scott DeLeon is on the call if you wish to take up 7.4 before lunch.
And just real quick before Mr. Carter leaves and Ms. Hutt leaves, was there consensus I believe there was consensus for changing the Board of Supervisors section. There was another item that we also asked about changing that I can't.
CAO part.
Yeah, the CAO, just wondering if there's a consensus to having the auditor controller or having that reviewed, that it's not the
Oddity there is
CAO?
it's an admin policy, not an auditor policy, so we'll have to look into it, though.
Okay, look into it. There's consensus to look into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And make sure it works
No,
for.
I'm not trying to put more on the CAO at all.
Yeah. And making sure that it works for other districts and other electeds.
If it helps out, I'm very willing to make it the deputy CAO.
That's awesome, 'cause that's not me either. Thank you, Board.
Thank you so much, and thanks for coming in.